faithfully delivering value and exploring great books worldwide. Hi, this is Sally Talks Books. Today, we're diving into the book When Breath Becomes Air, a memoir by an American neurosurgeon and his final work. This doctor was Paul Kalanithi, diagnosed with advanced lung cancer at 36 years old. As a doctor, Paul faced patients' deaths countless times and saved many from the brink. This time, it was his turn. Cancer spread from his lungs to his whole body and brain, making normal movement impossible. Paul decided to pick up the pen and write about his illness journey. He also recalled his medical career, including tough cases and patients who passed. He used writing to ponder. When someone knows death is near, how should they live? Paul's writings started in 2013 and ended in 2015. After his death, his wife published the book we're discussing, When Breath Becomes Air. After its 2016 release, the book became a global bestseller in over 40 countries and topped lists like the New York Times. This isn't a hospice guide. It doesn't give step-by-step advice for terminal illness. But Paul and his patient stories inspire us to think about what truly matters. Bill Gates said he's usually unmoved by tear-jerking death stories, but this book made him admire it and cry. Famous host Kai Kang-yang said, "If life feels light and meaningless, this book acts like a paperweight, reminding us of life's weight." So what did Paul share in the book? How did he face death? Now, let's listen together to Paul's story. Paul was an Indian American, born in 1977 and raised in Arizona, USA. His dad was a doctor. His mom worked in education. As a kid, Paul didn't aim to be a doctor. Inspired by his mom, he read classics and fell in love with literature. Later, Paul got into Stanford's English literature program and earned a master's degree. He once believed that literature is the pinnacle of spiritual life, the key to unraveling human nature and the meaning of life. If he'd stayed on that path, Paul would have probably become a writer. However, a small incident before starting undergrad changed his life forever. Back then, Paul stumbled upon a novel that said, "Thoughts are just the product of brain activity." He was totally shaken by that line. Oh, it turned out that all those vibrant worlds in literature and human free will are bound by the physical laws of brain function. It's as mysterious as magic. That very night, he started scouring Stanford's course catalog for biology and neuroscience classes. By undergrad graduation, he'd earned a double major in English, literature, and human biology from Stanford. As his thinking deepened, Paul felt more and more that literature's grasp on life was way too shallow. He wanted to know why humans feel passion, love, and hunger. These feelings are driven by stuff like digestion, heartbeats, and the brain, creating those soul-stirring stories and poems. Aren't they all just conjured up by millions of neurons in the end? So, to truly understand the spiritual world built by words, you got to master how the physical body works. Just like that, Paul decided to ditch literature for medicine and got into Yale Medical School. If before Paul was trying to grasp life and death through abstract words, medicine forced him to face death's brutal reality head on. In anatomy class, Paul opened a cadaver's stomach and found 2 undigested morphine pills inside. Paul figured this meant the donor died in agony, maybe alone, at the end, fumbling with the pill bottle. Another time, the professor showed the students the body of a pancreatic cancer patient. The professor asked, "How old was this person?" The students replied, 74. The professor said, "Me too." Then he put down the laser pointer and walked off. These med school experiences sharpened Paul's understanding of life and death. After med school, he started as a neurosurgery resident at Stanford Medical School. Neurosurgery is the toughest specialty in medicine with the longest training. Usually, after graduating, med students need 7 years of residency training before they can officially practice. Paul chose neurosurgery because it deals with the human mind, closest to the spiritual world, and best helps him understand human nature and the meaning of life. Hospitals witness life and death dramas every day, some happening to Paul's own patients. He documented his first death case in the book. She was 82-year-old Mrs. Harvey, who came in for a minor surgery due to constipation from a mild bowel obstruction, but suddenly took a turn for the worse one midnight after surgery. Paul was on duty in general surgery that night, and no matter what he tried, Mrs. Harvey didn't improve. Later, Mrs. Harvey went to the OR. Her condition stabilized temporarily, but she still passed away at 8 p.m. the next evening. Paul felt both angry and sad. Before, some patients were just tiny notes on charts to him. After that, he realized those notes were real living people. In his first year as a resident, he witnessed quite a few deaths. For instance, people with head trauma from shootings, suicides, or bar fights. Some didn't survive, and the stress and gloom from death hung thick in the air. Sometimes it felt suffocating for Paul. And for neurosurgeons, the challenge isn't just keeping patients alive, but helping them live meaningfully and with quality. Because neurosurgery studies and treats the human brain and nervous system, with functional areas controlling emotions, perception, behavior, and more. Brain surgery can easily damage these areas. Even tiny injuries might completely alter a person's life, um, like causing blindness, loss of right hand mobility, inability to calculate, or even memory loss. A beloved little boy named Matthew, only 8 years old, came to Paul's hospital. He came in for headaches, and doctors found a tumor near the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus sits above the brainstem, about the size of an almond, less than 1% of the brain's volume. But it's incredibly important controlling fundamental human needs like sleep, hunger, thirst, and sexual behavior. Tumor growth can damage the hypothalamus, disrupting basic functions like sleep and eating, but surgery also risks harming it. Doctors removed Matthew's tumor. At first, the surgery seemed successful, and within days, Matthew was bouncing back home. But nobody expected that years later, Matthew would be readmitted. That adorable little boy had turned into a little monster. He constantly binged on food and lashed out violently, kicking and punching others. His mom's arms were covered in bruises from his scratches. Oh, turns out that surgery years ago caused a 1 millimeter injury to Matthew's hypothalamus, completely destroying his ability to control eating or emotions. Finally, his family had to send him to a specialized facility. No one dared imagine what Matthew would be like years later, weighing over 200 pounds. Cases like this always torment doctors. Before every brain surgery, doctors must discuss risks and side effects with patients and families. Each question is a soul-crushing dilemma. Would you trade speech for a few extra months of life? Would you make that choice for your mom to spend her remaining years in silence? Would you sacrifice your right hand's mobility to stop body tremors? How much suffering must a child endure before death becomes the kinder choice? And when surgery can't save a life, like a patient with unstoppable brain hemorrhage arriving at the hospital, a single conversation between the neurosurgeon and family may forever shape how they remember this death. Is it worth struggling to live a few more days or months hooked to a ventilator? Just maintaining an empty shell? If doctors guide families to ponder these questions, they might find peaceful acceptance. Yeah, it was his time to go. To Paul, these dilemmas answered his original reason for becoming a doctor. What gives life meaning? What makes it worth living? Answers vary person to person. Paul himself had no universal solution. He gradually realized he must understand patients' thoughts, personalities, and values before surgery, why they live to offer the best treatment options. Residency work exhausts both body and mind. Beyond immense pressure, their hours are brutally long. A neurosurgery resident's day usually starts at 6 a.m. and lasts until the final surgery ends. Paul and his colleagues worked about 100 hours weekly. Some chose to quit. Paul himself was often so exhausted he'd tear up and get headaches. At 2 a.m., he'd still be chugging energy drinks. After shifts, he'd nap in his car before driving home to collapse in bed. In his sixth residency year, his body started failing, first with weight loss, making his pants looser. Soon came stabbing chest pains. He'd wake at night drenched in sweat, sheets soaked, coughing relentlessly. Once in New York, waiting at Grain Central, his whole back seized in spasms. Painkillers failed. Speechless, he curled on the floor, screaming until security came. Tests showed lung cancer invading multiple organs, terminal. At 36, after 6 residency years, with 1 to go, he'd won top medical awards. Elite universities offered positions. He was steps from becoming a neurosurgery professor. Yet cancer erased years of effort and future plans instantly. In his words, it was like a marathoner collapsing near the finish line. The book hasn't specified his cancer's cause, but odds at 36 were 0.00012%. Paul was that unlucky one. Cancer forced him to see illness and death through a patient's eyes. As a doctor, he'd observed others suffering. When ill himself, he discovered how brutal fighting disease truly is. Humbled, stark contrast. His prior observations paled against first-hand experience. His body deteriorated rapidly. Once a half-marathon runner, now simple leg lifts exhausted him. Worse than physical torment was the mental crisis. Dr. Paul helped patients and families think rationally, but patient Paul facing death felt as lost as anyone. He understood every lab value, but had no idea what step to take next. He sighed helplessly. If I knew exactly how many months or years I had left, things might be clear. If told I had 3 months, I'd spend it all with family. 1 year, I'd write a book. 10 years, I'd return to surgery and research. But the problem is, he didn't know his lifespan. After diagnosis, Paul stopped working for rest and drug therapy. Like his childhood and college self, he sought answers in literature. He voraciously read anything about death, hoping for direction. During this ordeal, he said, literature gave me rebirth. Years earlier, he'd noticed Darwin and Nietzsche agreed. Life's core trait is the struggle to survive. For Paul now, life's length didn't matter. Death comes for all. Wherever one goes, death's shadow blurs meaning. He decided to live present, strive relentlessly without seeking outcomes, even with just 1 day left. 6 months post-diagnosis, his condition stabilized with treatment. He decided to return to surgery. To operate, he trained his body, standing long hours, manipulating tiny objects precisely. Over weeks, his strength returned. Surgical skills regained proficiency. His hands could again handle micron-thin blood vessels without damage. Within a month, he was operating at near full capacity. He returned to 16-hour workdays, reconnecting closely with patients. No exhausting, it brought spiritual solace. Operating daily, he'd collapse onto empty hospital beds when night shifts overwhelmed him. He came home too tired to eat, but fully immersed in work's joy, temporarily forgetting death's shadow. During this, Stanford Medical School offered him tenure, generous terms including millions, to establish a neuroscience lab and lead a clinical team. Plus, the schedule and workload were flexible, tailored to his health. They offered Lucy generous terms too. Call deeply desired this role. It meant continuing as a doctor while becoming a neuroscientist. This was every med student's dream job. Located in Wisconsin, USA, but if his condition worsened within a year or two, Lucy would be stranded there alone. Besides, running a lab required at least 20-year planning. Given his health, he couldn't last that long. Heartbroken, he declined the offer. 7 months after returning, Paul graduated, completing 7 grueling residency years. But then new tumors grew in his lungs. He knew treatment would be harsher this time. Hope for longevity vanished. Yet he felt neither anger nor fear, such is life. After relapse, Paul's health plummeted. A week post-biopsy, doctors said medication couldn't sustain him anymore. Chemo was mandatory, 4.5-hour infusions with brutal side effects, ending his career. Post-infusion, he lost all appetite. Even reading exhausted him. On graduation day, relentless bile vomiting sent him to the ER, missing his own ceremony. Thus began his final chapter, hair shedding rapidly, body failing faster. Everything he loved, literature, surgery, research, was now beyond reach. Since diagnosis, he'd lost 18 kilograms. In just post-graduation week, he dropped nearly 7 more kilograms. He described himself as a walking X-ray, skin and bones. Lifting his head exhausted him. Holding water required both hands. Reading was impossible. Yet in these fading days, Paul found his final light. This little life, his daughter, had come against all odds. Paul met Lucy during his first year of med school. They fell in love, married, and both worked in hospitals. They were soulmates, not just spouses. But Paul's insane hours strained their marriage, leaving no time for family. Every night Paul came home, Lucy was asleep. Before dawn, he'd leave, Lucy still sleeping. This lasted 6 residency years. Just before Paul's cancer diagnosis, Lucy suggested separation, to give them space to rethink their marriage. It's heartbreaking, but cancer saved their marriage. Learning Paul had terminal cancer, Lucy held him weeping in his hospital bed. She told Paul she still loved him. They decided to have a child, choosing life over waiting for death. When Lucy gave birth, Paul's dad wheeled him in. A cot waited in delivery. Paul lay wrapped in warming blankets so his frail body wouldn't shiver. The baby arrived, a girl, the nurse asked. Can she do skin to skin with you? Paul's teeth chattered from cold. No, I'm too cold, but I really want to hold her. When their daughter was 5 months, Paul's cancer resisted drugs. Chemo stopped working. Near death, Paul spiked a fever. Sky-high CO2 levels caused respiratory failure. All signs showed he wouldn't last long. Doctors said only a ventilator could prolong life, but intubation was agony. Paul refused. Cancer had spread to his brain. Extra time might lack meaning. So Paul chose comfort care, essentially palliative sedation. No tubes, no aggressive treatment, just morphine for a peaceful passing. In his final moments, Paul thanked his parents, told Lucy, "I love you," last time, and made them promise to publish his book. The breathing mask came off. Morphine flowed into his veins. He slipped into a coma. Warm sunset light filled the room. His breaths grew softer. As night fell, Paul closed his eyes, drew one last deep breath, exhaled slowly, and departed this world. His daughter was just 8 months old then. He didn't live to see his daughter reach an age where she'd remember him as he'd hoped. The afterword was written by Lucy. She reflected on Paul's final days, how he kept writing relentlessly. Propped in his wheelchair, wrapped in a wool blanket, he finished the book in his last months with unimaginable focus. All told friends why he wrote it, to document the emotional journey toward death. Since readers would face this too, he avoided sentimentality, just showed what truly awaits on this path. Writing clarified life's meaning. Death is inescapable, but with courage to live toward death, embracing every second fully. And each moment before death brings you infinitely closer to eternity. All right, that concludes our reading of When Breath Becomes Air. Reading notes are below the audio. See you tomorrow.